NRL Fantasy is in the books for round 1, and we are back with Buy, Hold, Sell for round 2. Welcome back. I'm Longy, former overall champ, and we can see an excited man just below me here. Biz, how you doing, mate?
Mate, how good to be back. We're back for another season of Buy, Hold, Sell. I don't know, can we call it a season? But we've got Tommy Talau up front. We've got the new guy next to him, and we've got Payne Haas leading the way with 81 points. Was he in your team, Longy, and is he going to be in our buy section this week?
Oh, Payne Haas. We've got to talk about it right away, right? So with Payne Haas, 81 points, 49 minutes. It's a bit of a different situation. He was deployed differently, played like an animal, not in my team, and I want to see another week of him. I want to see if he can replicate it against Canberra. I'm guessing you're in the same boat.
Yeah, look, the thing with Payne Haas is I loved how he played, but I didn't love the minutes, 49 minutes. Now, yes, it was a blowout, so he might have been rested early. But even if he played out the game, I think he was on track for a 55 to 58-minute game. So pretty much similar to last year. He's going to have games, we've seen it before, where he goes 80, 90, and he's going to have quieter games at 45, 50. I think I'd love to have Payne Haas, but there's a different number one priority for me this week. And I'm sure he'll be at the top of most of everyone's priority board this week as well.
Well, let's cover that because we're going to jump right into buys in a second. But what we're doing this year is a bit of a different structure. It's buys, cash cows, pods, holds, and sells most weeks. They're all color-coded. And we've also got a change of leadership. We're saying farewell to a channel legend, Tommy Talau. He is no longer the mascot of the Casual Athlete. He has ascended beyond the poor fantasy performances that we brought him in for. He's now signed elsewhere. Any last words for Tommy here, Biz?
He was a beautiful man. And look at this. This is an amazing photo to sign off with. I wish I had a photo shoot of this quality. But yeah, Tommy, thanks for the memories. I don't know. You've graduated from the school of the Casual Athlete, now become a solid mid-ranger, and all the best with your future endeavors, mate.
He was special. He was special. And now we bring in a new channel mascot, the smiling assassin, Brendan Piakura, who opened the year with a -9. Now, that was one of the most impressive fantasy dud performances we've ever seen. He's averaged -4.5 in round 1 performances across his career, so he's consistent. Are you excited about this guy? And do you think we're going to keep him for a long time, or do you think it'll be another one-and-done contract like Tommy Talau?
I think a one and done. He's got the talent. He's got Lord Jack G in front of him, but he's got the Tommy Talau mustache. Maybe it's that. But look, I think if he gets on the park this year, he's got enough talent to bust out a few scores. I think it's a one-year contract for Piakura.
Well, for now, he's our competition mascot, the Casual Athlete mascot, Brendan Piakura. Watch him closely because he's our guy. Now, tearing into buy, hold, sell. New format here. You can see it all along the top there. So that's buys, cash cows, pods, holds, and sells. You can see what we're up to. All the players will be highlighted too. Jamie Humphries is first. Look, 403K. He pumped out a 75 on the weekend. That included 30 tackles, 0 misses. It included 732 kick meters. It was an all-out base performance, a try assist in there as well. But for 75 points, he's going to make some serious cash. Now, he held the spot this week. Dodd is reportedly dealing with an injury, so that might be why he's held it, or he might have won the spot. We don't really know what's going on in South Sydney, but you can't ignore this guy, right?
No, that was such an impressive round 1 performance. I think he had 6.7% ownership. Not many people were talking about him. I know Jamie and his channel was talking about him, so kudos to him for that. But I didn't, for mine, it was a wait and see. I didn't expect a 75 coming out. So it's a shame I missed out on that score. So I think now everyone has to put him at the top of the board. Don't expect 75 every week. If you look at his reserve grade stats and just generally looking at his stats, like he's not making 30 tackles with 0 misses every week. He's not kicking for 700 each week. I think that moderates to probably a 45, 50 average if he keeps up that level of form. The one thing I will say, though, is awkwardly priced 400K. So it is going to be tricky to get him in for a lot of teams, especially if you're holding guys like Metcalf. And the other thing to Jamie Humphries is that Souths are not the most rock-solid team this year. So they just held on for a win against the Dolphins. If they come out and lose a game or two, then it could be Dodds coming back straight in for Humphries, and Humphries plays hooker or bench. So not totally devoid of risk, but just given the break-even and week 1 performance, can't really risk not getting him in.
Yeah, real cash grab. Got to jump on him. A lot of teams as well, I'm seeing them, they have to sell someone who's probably not normally someone you would sell. So Metcalf, we'll talk about him in the hold section, but he's someone I'd normally want to hold. But for Jamie Humphries, you almost have to do it. So, yeah, you got to get Jamie Humphries. The cash generation is going to be too much. I'll throw to you, Biz, for Connor Watson here.
Yeah, Connor Watson. Look, if you haven't started with him all preseason, then it's a rough one to bring in given his price point. But he came out, he played a lot of minutes at hooker, so 50, 60 odd at hooker, and then 20 plus at lock. We know he's an even better scorer at lock than he is at hooker. So that kind of combination means he's primed. Just given the injuries and the suspensions that the Roosters are going through, he's going to be playing 80 minutes for the foreseeable future. And he was probably one of their best week one in a very badly beaten side. So we've seen with the minutes that Connor Watson averages 60, 65, even more when he's playing at lock at times. So with the dual position, I'd be bringing him in if you don't have him already. That being said, he's at a tricky price point to bring in. And unless it's a case you're downgrading someone like a Nico Hines and then upgrading, say, Purdue to Jamie Humphries or something, then I believe Watson would be pretty hard to bring in. But he's a perfect option for anyone who's downgrading a fallen or gun that's looking that a bit more shaky this year.
Yeah, one thing I'll shout out here is the risk with him. So if there is injury in the back line or something like that, he's often the guy who moves to center or moves to half or, maybe even moves if there's a fullback injury just to the back line, someone else slides to fullback. So with the Roosters there, especially with Billy Smith floating around the reserves, you got to be precarious with that. Like, you got to be cautious because he can cop a 25, 30-point game when those things go wrong. And that's the risk with him. Like, when he plays 80 minutes, there's no risk at all. He's going to pump out big numbers, but he does have that versatility, which sometimes costs a player. I'm going to jump to Zach Hosking here. And Hosking's one that, I started with Hosking, right? So I wasn't running victory laps on this one necessarily, but I was pretty happy with 62 points. I was a bit cautious about the 67 minutes. I'll let you sort of share the counters here as a non-owner, but for mine, Hosking's ceiling is just so high. And as the year goes on, I would expect him to grow into sort of bigger and bigger minutes and more features in the attacking line. I also look at the matchup this week versus Brisbane, and look, Brisbane's edges aren't particularly effective defensively. We saw Rob Toyer absolutely tear them to shreds last week, and we've seen other guys sort of feature against them as well. So I'm looking at Hosking, and I think he could pop off a big score versus Brisbane this week, and he's going to need to play big minutes in this game if Canberra are going to be a shot, especially with Joey Tarpanay out of the team. That potentially pushing some other guys like Matty Nicholson into the middle forward rotation as opposed to the edge. So at 601K, he's got that ceiling to be an 850K player. Do I think he's going to be that? Probably not, but I'm pretty confident he gets to about 750 at some point, and that makes him worth the buy from a cash perspective.
Yeah, I'll hit you with a counter. 65, 67 minutes. It's pretty much what I expected from him. Rampant Raiders side against the really hapless Warriors side. I don't see the Raiders being that good consistently this year. The thing with Hosking is he does sway. Like, for example, he'll have some big scores. He'll have some lower scores where he misses a few tackles. He doesn't really get... He still only had 70, 80 odd run meters. A lot of attacking stats and 44 tackles with no misses or one miss on the weekend. Compressed field. I think, realistically, Hosking for me is an easy one. If you've started with him, great buy. Like, keep him. You enjoyed the ride. But if you didn't start with him, like, I'm not chasing him either because I don't really particularly. He's not going to average 60 plus playing these minutes. You've got Sasagi on the bench again this week and Matty Nicholson. Now, there's an argument that Matty Nicholson plays in the middle, but Matty Nicholson is a pretty small guy, I would say. I think you're more likely to see Hosking maybe come to the middle, but I've not really seen that too often before. So it's a real question mark on his minutes this week. So let's see. But in saying that, Hosking for mine, whenever he's on the field, he's generally one of the best players. So, look, I kind of wish I started with him, but I'm not going to go get him. So a pretty simple thesis there.
Yep, that's a fair shout. And then Corey Horsburgh, do you view him differently? A bit cheaper, a bit more secure in his role?
I view him a bit more differently because, like 50K cheaper. And I think he can, in the role he's playing and how good he looked in week one, I think he can average 55 to 60. And we've seen that before from Corey, that when he gets that lock role, which he was playing last week, and he plays for 60, 65 minutes, he can be a high 50s guy. He's a tackler, he's a runner, he's an offloader, all perfect for fantasy forwards. And he honestly looked like he had a point to prove last week. He was running hard, he was chucking the ball out the back very frequently in that middle forward rotation. I see a consistently higher scoring pattern for him, whereas I think Hosking, he's priced at 45 odd now, and I can see a 50, 52 average, whereas I think Corey Horsburgh's priced in the low 40s, and I'm expecting a mid to late 50s average with the role he played. So that's the difference for mine. I think you have to get Corey Horsburgh. Given he's already more expensive, his price rise is slower than Humphries, so I'd still prioritize Humphries for sure, but Horsburgh's not far behind for me.
Yeah, I mean, these generally guys to target as that second trade after Humphries. I've seen a few people looking at potentially downgrading Mitch Barnett, who we'll talk about later, and then upgrading a failing cash cow or a Purdue or something like that to Jamie Humphries. I don't mind that as a pair of trades, but yeah, Horsburgh Hoskins. See, I view Hoskins' ceiling as higher. I think he could potentially be one of those guys who pumps out a 60 average in the back row. But things would have to go right. And look, Hudson Young, he's not going to lose minutes. So from real footy terms, it's probably going to be Hosking that does. So it's one thing to keep an eye on. Tommy Gilbert's the last one here, and he's a guy I started with. So we've got a bit of a mixed bag between us here. But for Gilbert, I was stoked with that performance. So 57 minutes, 59 tackles, pumped out a bunch of base stats, wanted to be in everything. And that attitude of jumping into tackles as the second, third man in, that follows a player, right? And that leads to a lot of tackles. And I'm thinking of OG Nathan Hindmarsh. I'm thinking of David Staggs, Andrew McCullough back in the day. Tommy Gilbert's going to be that guy, and he could pump out a massive average tackle count. Now, to temper expectations a bit, I had him forecast as a 47 in the preseason. I've upgraded that to a 50 to 52 as a result of that last game. I'm still not saying he's going to be a 65 guy, right? I think people are overreacting a bit there. But for a dual position guy who can pump out 50 points each week with, who's the club captain, his role is secure, and there's injuries in the forward pack now for the Dolphins as well, so he's not going to drop minutes to Max Plath on the edge anymore. I think this is a bit of a no-brainer at 529K.
Yeah, I think it's a great buy. I mean, again, if you started with him, great. If you didn't, like me, I'm not rushing to get him in. And huge score, dual position, 500K, but I think there's just other priorities for me this week. The thing I see with Gilbert is he got the minutes I expected, the high 50s minutes. It's exactly kind of what his average minutes are at lock. Now, he's not going to make 59 tackles in 57 minutes every week. Like, that's ridiculous numbers.
Won't he?
No. He definitely won't. He's never shown that trajectory. And I just you can generally, when someone has a really high or low tackle count, the good way to judge them is the tackle counts of other players and relative to their kind of historical average. Jeremy Marshall-King made 55 tackles in this game in the middle in 69 minutes. Jeremy Marshall-King is not a 55 tackle guy. So there's clearly more tackles to be made up the middle in this game. And Gilbert enjoyed that. Now, I 100% agree. He was chasing every tackle. He was flopping on tackles that were finished like 5 minutes ago, which is great for fantasy. Totally useless in real life, but great for fantasy. Probably an element of first game back in a lot of time. I do think he averages 50, so that makes him a buy. But again, you get 2 trades a week, and I would still prioritize guys like Humphries above him. Probably have Gilbert over Horsburgh. I mean, if you've got a great trade situation would be someone like, for example, if you have like a 700, 800K edge forward that you can downgrade that didn't do that well week one, didn't get the role you expected, and then you get Tommy Gilbert, and then you upgrade like a Purdue to Humphries. That's an epic trade. Yeah. The problem is a lot of people succeeded this week, and there's not many trade-out options. Like, I'd say a lot of the more speculative players actually hit this week. So it's pretty hard to downgrade someone. But otherwise, look, awesome to see Gilbert back on the footy field. Absolute machine. Honestly, looked like the Terminator chasing people around. But look, he's a tricky one for mine. He's definitely a buy, but just given that there's only 2 trades, I can't see it happening this week.
Yeah, for my side, I only use 1 trade this week. That's my plan right now. But I have seen some teams be sent through where they've got some serious problems. And they've got guys like Aaron Clark, for example. They've got, Dylan Walker. These are the types of players who, for a small price, you can upgrade to Tom Gilbert. So that's more who I'm speaking to there. I wouldn't trade out, a Seyfarth for a Tom Gilbert. That's a trade I've rejected. We'll talk about Seyfarth in the hold section as well. Now, in terms of cash generation, the cheapies, this is a pretty important section. And look, we'll fire through these ones pretty fast because the pods are up next, which is the most fun part of this whole thing. But Savelia Tamale, so he's a guy I started. And my reasoning pre-round 1 was that he pumped out massive numbers in reserve grades. So led New South Wales Cup in line breaks, tackle breaks, and post-contact meters. Was just an absolute monster with the ball in hand. Now, what we saw in Vegas, it was now 2 weeks ago, but don't forget, was we saw him absolutely tear up that game as well. So 49 points as a rookie winger in a matchup against the Warriors without a try, right? So you get nearly 50 points out of a dual position guy at 300K. Absolutely fantastic. I'm a big fan. Xavier Savage is out suspended, which I think is almost bad news for him because it gives Hopewadi a shot to try and fire a shot back. If Savage wasn't out suspended, I actually would have liked it better because I think he just is undroppable after that performance. But there's a howler this week against Brisbane, who's a much tougher matchup. That makes him a bit riskier. Saying that, the scoring production was too good. 329K. I think he's a must have, but I'm keen to hear your perspective as a non owner, Biz.
Yeah, it's a tricky one for me because I agree with everything you've said. I think it's really good that he was named on the same wing as last week and didn't switch over to Savage's wing for Albert Hopewade. That's kind of this leading indicator of who's got that spot. And the fact that Hopewade is now seen as the replacement rather than going back to that position is a great news. I love the Tamale talent. I think he can be a Mazu type. I think Raiders will be decent this year. I think Broncos are a tough matchup, but like you said, like the edges can have issues. So, we saw Rob Toya, Mark Nawanga, Nita Wase, like they had pretty decent games. Dong Young scored a couple of tries. So it's there. I mean, he can have a big game still. My problem with him is like, who are you trading him for? Because there's some obvious options, but just running through my scenario, like I have Shibasaki. Trading to him is, I think Tamale averages more than Shibasaki, but when you factor in you're losing a trade to do that, probably not worth it. Nawanga Nitawase at this point was named, so I can't really trade him. If he drops out for Billy Smith, it's an easy one. But I think with Tamale, in terms of being a must-have, look, I can't see him making any less than 150, 200K from here with upside for more. I mean, if he can be a Mazu type or a Brian To'o type, he could get up to 50 average. He had 48 in reserve. So, look, if you've got someone you can move for him, or have the cash to move like a Purdue or a similar player for him, I think it's a great trade. But definitely one of the best cashes available.
What if you had a bunch of hookers and you had Mamazella sitting there?
Nah, Mamazella, look, he made 45 tackles for 32 points or something. I think he got the minutes, and Sullivan's back on the bench still. So same kind of composition as last week. He got 72 minutes. I think historically he can pump out a high 40s or mid to high 40s average with that. So I would not be trading Mamazalas, that's for sure.
If you could stretch a guy like Purdue into Tamale, let's say you had the spare cash, I think that's a no-brainer, right?
Yeah, definitely. I would definitely. But how about a couple more situations? What about Iongi, 28 with a try? Parramatta looked woeful. Would you trade him for Tamale?
Well, we penciled Yongi in for a sort of mid to high 30s average. I've got Tamale more as a mid 40s average. Make a bit of cash off that as well. If I was desperate, I'd consider it, but I think Yongi will score well against the Tigers this week, so it's probably not worth doing. It's a bit messy. I mean, I would think maybe Mark Nwani Tuase would be one I'd consider because you make a bit of cash out of that as well, but it is messy. I do see him, though, getting into the mid 500s at some point, which is a low 40s average. So if you can get him in, definitely try to. And if you're prioritizing two buys this week, more generally for everyone, I would say Humphreys then Tamale are the ones that you'd want to be really rushing in to make that cash. Now, I'll talk about Hamish Stewart here. So Stewart looked good. He looked good in this game. I think it was 42 points in 43 minutes, something like that. He came out, look, he benefited from a few injuries. So obviously Ryan Couchman, really bad injury for him. Jack DeBellin copped the HIA. But I'm not going to say Stewart benefited enormously because we saw inflated minutes for Toby Couchman. We saw inflated minutes for Emre Gula. And Stewart also got a good chunk of minutes. So, which ones really absorbed all those minutes? I guess the Fatal Mariner injury, that definitely helps as well. But I think Stewart might have earned his way into a role in this team. So I kind of like the look of him, 257K. There's a bit of risk in this. So Tom Eisenhuth will come back soon. Hame is around. And any club that's looking to sign David Clemmer makes me feel like they don't like the props they have because he's not much of an upgrade on anyone. So there is a lot of risk in this one. But I think Hamish Stewart, if he gets a role and keeps it, is a guy who will pump out pretty good numbers and a solid PPM rating there. So if you want to take the gamble there, Hamish Stewart's not too bad. He does have the buy in round 3, though. So I'd probably advise to wait a week on him, even though it's going to cost a bit of cash.
Yeah, Hamish Stewart is really interesting one. I know he's highly rated internally, and he had a great performance. I agree with everything you said. The only thing to know is, so many players come back. Blake Laurie's back as well this week, and Blake Laurie is traditionally a bigger minute player than some of these impact guys. But I can still see Hamish Stewart this year being last year's Tom Eisenhuth, where you're kind of waiting and watching, and there's just other trades being made, and all of a sudden he's like 500, 600K, and you're just like, wow, like what happened? And he kind of is maybe the best cashier or close to the best cashier of the year, and he just never showed enough to be the top buy, and so he just slips under everyone's radar. So I can see that happening.
He was damn good, man. He was damn good. I'll throw Shibasaki and Arthur's to you. So Shibasaki is a bit below 350. Arthur's a bit above 350. I've just called it 350 here. I think it's worth talking about them together because they're historically not great scorers, but they're in a pretty hot Brisbane side.
Yeah, Shibasaki, look, he was in my team last second by just to plug my center spot. Got lucky. Look, I don't think he's scoring 50 plus every week. Brisbane looked really hot, but Roosters were poor defensively at times last year. They've lost a lot of talent, and they were very poor defensively in the trials as well. So I wouldn't get too excited about this performance. I would not be buying Shibasaki or Arthurs if I didn't start with them. In fact, Shibasaki is still a potential trade-out target for me for a guy like Tamale, on the fact that, look, I know I can't trade him because of the low break-even, but going forward, I think Tamale is a 40s guy and Shibasaki is like a 30s guy. I think they're going to have boom games when Brisbane are really clicking, but I don't think Brisbane are going to roll over teams like they did week one that consistently. Like, they're good, but they're not Penrith or Melbourne level good. So I know I might cop a lot of hate for saying that because everyone's hyping them up. But look, they were kind of going against a very, like, Shibasaki and Arthurs were running at guys who, like Sandon Smith and Robert Toya, who don't have much experience and not renowned defenders anyway. So, look, they can have big games. Like, Arthur's had a pretty much elite game with a bunch of attacking stats, still just crossed 50. And for like 2 or 3 years of track record, he's only been like a 26 guy. So don't bring him in. Shibasaki is a bit more interesting, but now that he's kind of, like, I would prioritize Tamale over him for sure and Humphreys over him for sure. But look, it's they'll have big games that overall I think the average will only improve by a few points from the historical run rates.
Yeah, and I will say too, like, I haven't included Rob Toya in this list. I haven't included, a few other guys like Tom Duffy. These guys are must-haves, right? So if you don't have them, go get them. But I just haven't included them because they're in basically every team. I will say for the Broncos, though, so I want to read out this next run of fixtures, and then I want to pose a question to you. So they got Raiders this week, which is a pretty tough matchup. Then it goes Cowboys, Dolphins, Tigers, Roosters, and Warriors. Now, if you were designing the easiest run of games you could, that's probably almost what it is. You just add Parramatta into it as well, which hurts to say. But if I was a rookie coach who was a bit behind this week, and, I have Rob Toya, I have those base cash cows already, is targeting Shibasaki, who historically averages 32, with a great run of fixtures and a hot Brisbane side, the worst idea? Like, I think it could make sense and could benefit someone massively.
Yeah, I think so. But I mean, if you've got Tamale already, you're pretty good on that front. I still have Nawangania Wase above him for scoring potential for not that much more. Obviously pending him not losing the spot to Billy Smith. It's really hard to, like, I don't try not to get too excited after watching one game because I know it's a great draw, but that was like a proper brutalization of the Roosters, right? So a lot of attacking stats. Base stats wise, it's still only 12 tackles and 130 meters, and like 40 of which were from the try he scored. So he's going to have games where the tries might go the other side, the tries might go up the middle, and he kind of only scores 25, 30, and it halts his price generation. So I think of that awkward price. Like, honestly, I would take Stafford Tower at 250K over Shibasaki. I'd potentially gamble on a guy like Kautonga, who's been named at the bench dual position, 250K. And the other guys, cheapies here, like Riley Smith, 230K, who played 55 minutes. Like, I would rather go down to those than buy a Shibasaki.
See, I'm agreeing with Riley Smith. Stafford Toa, I think, is a big trap. So Talon May potentially being signed by the Tigers. Stafford Toa would be the guy to step out. But I do get what you're saying. Go for those cheapies and save 100K. Use that 100K elsewhere to upgrade Kobe Hetherington to Tom Gilbert, for example. Now, Jack Jezewski's here too, and he's always here. And I've included Pia Kura, our Lord and Savior, on this as well, because Pia Kura deserves the minutes. All right, we're Pia Kura fans now. He deserves those minutes. And poor Pia Kura got onto the game way too late last week. then got himself sin binned immediately, right? So Jezewski now becomes interesting because he is so clearly favored over Pierre Kura. 276K, scored a try in that game. The try took his score up from what would have been a high 20s score to 45. Do you consider it at all at 276K?
I mean, I'm not looking at his performance last week for the same reason I said Shibasaki and Arthurs, but he does average 32 when playing 80 minutes. Now, the funniest thing was when I saw Pierre Cora come on. Who did he come on for? Not Jack G. He came on for Payne Haas. So they've probably got Jack G locked in for this 80-minute role here. So I think he's kind of value if Brisbane keep it up. The one thing I will say with, in a funny moment, like during that game, I think Shibasaki scored the first try and Corey Pake scored the second try. And I said in the group chat, this is like the journeyman game. I bet you Jack G scores next. And next set, Jack G rolls over. He's really an interesting one because, like, have you considered therapy? Like, that's the best way to put it. Like, the footy statistics guys have nailed it on the head. But he does average 32 and 80-minute games. This is probably the best team he's played in. Coach loves him. Low break even. I'll look at him this week. I'm not saying I'm getting him, but I'll look at him closely. If it fits me, I also don't have a spare edge. So this could be one that I could move some guys to. I'd rather. I'm just going in circles here. Just make a call and go with it. I don't know. Like historically, no. Role is different. 80 minutes, better team. Could be good. Could be crap. I'll say yes. You know what? I'm going to be pro Jack G this year. Jack G, baby. Go buy him.
Okay, all right. You can be pro him. I'll go against him then for my boy Brendan Piakura, the future Origin star and immortal. I think Piakura will. I'm going beyond the joke here now. I think Piakura will at some point earn some minutes again. Starting off with the sin bin wasn't a great start for him, but at some point when it's inconvenient, Jack Jezewski will let you down. I am certain of that because to be worth a trade, unless I'll caveat this, unless you're using him as a cash out to make something else happen, and it's really beneficial to you, I don't mind that. But if you're trading to get him, like you're trading Purdue for Jezewski or something like that, which is something that's been floated to me a bit, you're trusting Jezewski to go up from 276, let's call it 150K per trade, up to what, 426K? Do you trust him to do that?
No.
If he scores a try every week, he might, but it's unlikely to me.
The only way I'd bring in Jack G is if I'm downgrading someone to make cash to move someone to Humphreys or something, because there's no way he's worth two trades. And like exactly in that situation, it just takes one game where he makes 20 tackles, 2 missed, 50 meters, and it's like a 20-point banger, and it slows down all the cash generation. Yeah. So I personally would only buy him very situationally. Like if I could downgrade, like I'm just saying someone who's 330K to upgrade someone who's 360K to like Humphreys, then I would do that, but wouldn't consider him to get him, no.
Also a bit injury prone. I'll throw that in too. And then last one here, we got the Roosters boys, Fighetti and Steep before we get into the pods. So Fighetti's been named to start. Steep is on the bench. I've included them both, and they're both around that 260K mark. Now, Fighetti, not historically the best fantasy scorer in reserves, not the guy who's super hyped from what I've heard. Whereas Steep, he's on the bench, which is not as attractive, but I was at a launch event with Tedesco, and he was talking about Steep as a guy who we should watch this year and who could potentially break out. So Steep is the one that has the pedigree, but Fighetti seems to have the role. Now, if I was jumping on one of these guys, I'd be very cautious of a couple of guys coming back. So Nat Butcher, Victor Radley, also Spencer Leniu coming back soon. It's a risky situation to step into. If I was going to get one of them, I'd probably back the talent, get Steep, and just take my time with it. Are you in the same boat, or would you go with the starting lock?
Yeah, I think Fighetti will start on the edge with Wong playing lock again, like last week. I know the team list something like that, but I wouldn't touch either of these guys. Like you named the guys coming back. Plus, they've also got Egan Butcher to come back. Was he named this week? I can't remember if I saw his name. I don't think so. But he's due back next week or the week after. Look, I wouldn't be touching these guys, especially with the cows above them who have a bit more security. I think they'll be good short burst scorers, but you might not see them again for another 10, 15 weeks until Origin time. So easy skip for mine.
Easy skip. Let's roll through some pods then. And Toby Couchman's up first. I'll throw him to you.
Yeah, 1 ppm pretty much, got huge minutes. Look, he's kind of the same argument as Hamish Stewart, like a young guy, clearly favoured by the coaching regime. But just a lot of guys to come back for the Dragons would have benefited from the ACL of Ryan Couchman. Minutes wise, really sad to see that, but he would have benefited from that. And obviously came for the DeBell and HI got some extra minutes, and just guys missing from the pack. We talked about Laurie coming back, Tyler Mariner, Eisenhower all sniffing around. Risky pod could pay off. He got huge minutes and he's got the PPM. But for me, I'm not doing it.
Yep, Mega Beast won't get 70 minutes every week. Hamaso Tabuai Fado, I'm going to jump on this. So I've been anti-Hamaso for a long time for fantasy, and it's just because that base hasn't been there historically. Now, he came into this game in round one, played against South Sydney, didn't have big attacking stats, but had great run meters, some tackle breaks, a very strong base, pumped out 55 points. Now, when I see that, I think, oh, okay, that could be a fullback making the leap, because most fullbacks don't start elite, right? They start a bit plotty. It's like with Yongi. We're talking about him as a 35 to 40 guy. Hamaso was a bit low scoring, and then he would break out big attacking plays and they would bump up his scores artificially. Has he taken that leap this year? At some point, he will, I think, take that leap. And the signs were good last week. I'm going to watch him really closely this week, because if he has a bit of a solid base with the attacking upside he has and the way the Dolphins rely on him, oh man, that could be one of the pods of the year.
Yeah, great. He's a guy who can get on a real hot run real quick. So if he has a 3 to 5 game average of 60, 70, you're in the box seat. I think Isako is a very interesting proposition as well. People kind of slept on Isako. People talked about Mazu, but no one talked about Isako, who had a 50 average just a couple of years ago. Yeah, we talked about Isako, yeah, but that was pretty much ignored even by us. We talked about him, but then no one actually bought him. Look, he looked good. We've seen he can average 50 plus before. Dolphins require these wingers to get a roll on. Dolphins backs are really talented this year. Whether it's going to be Farnworth or Bostock, whoever's playing that center role, Avarillo, a lot of speed, a lot of ball distribution skills. He could be a great pick. I think at 539K in a really barren field for winger fullbacks this year, he's one I could potentially see myself reaching for if there's an injury to some of my other players or other guys aren't performing. One I'm definitely keeping an eye on.
Yeah, if I had 10 teams, he'd be in one of them for sure. But you're not going to crack the regular team. I always use that line. AJ Brimson, would you go Asako over Brimson, or is it pretty firmly Brimson?
Oh, Brimson, yeah. I mean, I kind of wish that I downgraded Campbell to Brimson last week, just so I had money to upgrade guys like Purdue straight to Humphreys, but didn't do it because I love Jaden Campbell. But I would have Brimson over Asako still.
Yep, fair shout. And then I'll go to John Bateman. Now, interesting scenes out of North Queensland. They got absolutely destroyed by Manly in round one. He comes out on the back of an 80-minute performance where he pumped out 57 points into a Cowboys team where they've dropped Jeremiah Nanai completely. So Nanai's gone. He got hooked in that game. He's out. I think the words from Todd Payton, I'm lip reading, were, "That guy can't tackle." Look, I don't know what he said about him, but the defense was not good. So Nanai's out. It's probably a 1 week thing. Kai O'Donnell comes in. It just means another week of 80 minutes for Bateman, and potentially could signal that Nanai is going to be held to a higher standard defensively, which would mean probably less minutes if he's going to have to chase more on defense. So John Bateman might end up being the Cowboys back rower who plays 80 minutes. And at 607K, he's a guy who has shown in the past he can average 55, 60, even low 60s. Now, 57 points on the back of that loss. There were some plays in it that weren't that great. But luckily for him, when he misses tackles against fast guys like the Manly guys have, he doesn't touch the player. So he avoided a few missed tackles. Look, I'm making a case here, but I think John Bateman's actually really interesting at 607K. And if you were desperate, I probably wouldn't get him over Hosking, but you'd have to really consider it.
Yeah, look, I don't think that much has changed for Bateman since the preseason. I just generally think he's an 80-minute back rower. He wasn't, for mine, going to play any less than 80 minutes. And 57 is a great score, but I'm going to watch because, he kind of looks washed from a fantasy perspective at least. He didn't have a great year last year, except when he was playing at lock. Even when he was playing for England last year, 2 games, he played 80 minutes, like a 25 and a 40 score. which for mine is just not worth it. He would need a mid-50s average to be worth it from here. Obviously got the 57 week one, but he's not on my priority list. I think if you started with him, good stuff. He's a pod to watch. If he comes out and scores 57 again and he looks like the old Bateman, then I might go get him before his price goes to the 750 mark. But I think the next second rower on this list is more interesting for mine, Kai Pearce-Paul. A lot of people on Dylan Lucas this year, and kind of Kai Pearce-Paul fell under the radar. Now, he had a tale of 2 seasons last year. There was the first half Kai Pearce-Paul who looked like a world beater, 150 meters a game. And the second half of the season, he didn't really cross 100 meters at all, like maybe once in the second half of the season. So we saw when he was running the ball, he's dynamic, he can bust tackles, he can offload, he's a decent tackler, he doesn't miss too many. There's no reason why he can't average 50 plus in his second year in the NRL. Still a young guy too. And at 600K, I think there's a lot of value there. Again, niggly pricing with other priorities, but he's one to watch for sure in the similar mold to John Bateman.
Yeah, he's an exciting option. Second year breakout as well. We talked about with Eli Katoa last year on his preferred right edge too. So he's an exciting one. If you could acquire him cheap in a draft league as well, I think he does have that upside, but there's quite a few back rowers who you could say that about. We'll jump into the holds and then we'll go to the sells and the traps as well. Now, this first one is going to be very, very controversial. So I might put this in the timestamp actually, 36 minutes, 48 seconds. All right, Luke Metcalf, 429K, had a disaster of a game in Las Vegas. Looked terrible, threw an intercept. Didn't have the best stat line, a lot of negative stats there. That's where the negatives end though. He led the kicking in that game, so he kicked more than Chanel Harris-Tavita did. He's been kept in the team. They're playing in New Zealand this week. Tough matchup versus Manly, but he has the potential to be that sort of low to mid 40s guy. So for me, I'm still penciling in about a 43 average for him. And that hasn't changed since round one. If he doesn't get dropped, he will make cash, and he'll probably make enough cash to sort of get into that, mid to high 500s area and make that 150K for you. It'll just take some time. So I guess the question on this one is, if you think the Warriors can play better than terrible football this week, and Metcalf can be better than terrible as well, he's a guy you should try to hold. Now, the caveat there is that if he's the only way you can get to Humphreys, you have to get to Humphreys, right? So I don't hate that completely, but I know I keep looking at my team and thinking I could do one trade, Metcalf to Humphreys. I don't want to do it though. I don't want to pull the trigger.
I don't want to do it either. And apologies to everyone who can probably hear a rattling. It's my dog running around my feet. She wants to eat breakfast, and I haven't given it to her yet. I agree. I think Metcalf, from an eye test, he didn't really pass it. He didn't look good out there. Warriors looked bad. But from a fantasy perspective, 300 plus kick meters, 18 tackles, missed a million, but goal kicking, he actually did better than I expected. Like the 300 kick meters is excellent. 38 average last year with less than 100 kick meters a game, no goals. Theoretically, he could still average in the high 40s, and he's 15, 16 points underpriced. The flip side to that is Tanner Boyd, Tamir Martin, Chanel Harris-Tavita, they can all step into that 7 role, and he kind of goes back to what they did last year, and the only benefit is goals. And in that Warriors side, goals probably not worth that much. So if I'm in that situation where I think I have to go Metcalf for Humphreys just because of my tomb composition. I don't love it though, because I can totally see Metcalf scoring 50 plus this week back at home versus Manly. So it's a tricky one, but I would say if you've got other options to get Humphreys, do it and give Metcalf another week. Look, I'd love to give Metcalf another week. I think he has it in him.
Let me throw some matchups at you, because Manly this week, Manly are not a defensive juggernaut, by the way. Everyone's kind of acting like that's the case because of round one. It's not the case. But then you've got the Roosters and the Tigers after that. And the Roosters is at home. The Tigers are playing at Campbelltown. They're matchups that he can exploit. And we've seen this guy run in full field tries, right? So I don't know. It's just, I'm going to try and find a way to keep him. I guess we're in the same boat there. We're going to try to keep him.
100% agree.
Because people are too keen. They're too excited to sell him. Like I'm hearing about people saying Metcalf to Gilbert, Metcalf to other players. It's like, no, not that. If you have to do it for Humphreys, it's the play. But if you can hold him, try to hold him.
Can I say something? Metcalf could still outscore Humphreys for the rest of the year.
Oh yeah.
If I still think Metcalf has the tools to be a 47, 48 average guy, and Humphreys could be a 45 to 50 guy as well. So really, you're just going sideways. So it's really hard to tell based on one game. So just caveat that. Like I'm saying that if Metcalf's keep the 7 roll, he can probably score the same.
Metcalf's also a buy in draft leagues if you're in those as well. So have a look at that. Angus Crichton and Jacob Preston. I put these boys together. They're around 700K. Gus is a bit above. I think he's 713. Preston's a bit below. I think he's like 688 or something like that. So they're both there around that price, and they both pumped out scores of 42 and 43 with next to no attacking stats. Now, for Gus Crichton, I'm an owner of Gus Crichton, so I paid a lot of attention. And there were 2 attempted offloads that he had that turned into errors. Each of those is a 6-point turnaround because instead of getting the +4, you get a -2 for an error. So those 2 were worth 12 points, basically. So for Gus Crichton, that could have been a 12-point turnaround. You bump that score up to, 55 instead of, 43. That 55 is totally acceptable. And you throw in the fact that one of those offloads was an attempted try assist. It's another 7 points. You get a 62 if something came off there, right? And then we're not having a conversation at all. So for my edge-back rowers, I'm not super pressed about whether they hit their attacking stats this week or next week or whatever it is. And for Gus Crichton, he's got Penrith this week, so it might be another tough matchup. But after that, the Roosters have a nice run of fixtures. So I think you got to stick with these guys. Like they're going to have their days of attack. Crichton and Preston both played 80 minutes. The roles were not anything different to what you expected. You must stay with the guns that had the role that you expected in preseason because you've done months of analysis to get these guys, and you just got to roll with it now. So Gus Crichton is not coming out of my team for better or for worse.
Yeah, I mean, Preston and Gus for years have proven that they're going to do what they're going to do, and one game doesn't change that. I agree with the analysis. Same for guys like Hopgood, like with a 47 week one, got 70 minutes. I wouldn't trade any of these guys because they could easily bust out a 75-point performance next week, and the typical rookie coach trades them out, and they'll have a cry later when they're like, "Oh, I can't believe they scored 75 when I traded them out." Like, obviously, that's going to happen. Like historical numbers tell you that's going to happen. So. That's good for that. I'll take Seyfarth because he's in my team. Look, he was on track for 80 minutes. It was a scrappy game against the Knights. Barely any tries scored. Both teams were dropping the ball a ton. Look, didn't pass the didn't pass the fantasy test in terms of the PPM, but all the stats point to when he gets 80 minutes as a 50-point guy. He's done it like close to 10 plus times now, so there's enough of a sample size. I wouldn't be trading him. Like the HIA slowed him down plus the game state. Looked on track for 80 minutes. Hold him. He could still be a 50 guy.
What about this? I'll throw a hypothetical at you. If you had Metcalf and Seyfarth in your team and you had sufficient depth at both of their positions, would you hold Metcalf or Seyfarth?
Hold Seyfarth because I think if I had to lose one, I would lose Metcalf just because he's more likely to get dropped on or lose his role on an ongoing basis. I don't think there's really any competition with Seyfarth's role.
That's a big call because Seyfarth is very droppable. So a lot of risk with Metcalf. Yep, fair shout. I agree. Hold Seyfarth, dual position. You probably don't have the depth, by the way. I've caveated with something that most people don't have. You don't have the spare depth to be selling a guy like Seyfarth. So stick with him. I think Seyfarth to Gilbert is a bit dicey as well. It's a bit of a low ceiling play. Yeah. I mean, you could do it. It's a slight upgrade, but is it worth 150K? Absolutely not. Harry Grant is here as well. And look, I've got Grant in my team. Look, Melbourne scored a bunch of points in this game. Grant scored that one cheap try. Didn't really get many points out of it. I don't know. I was a bit disappointed. Like, I felt like he was they're up by 50 and he was milking penalties instead of running the ball, which I didn't like attitude-wise from Harry Grant. Like, I thought he might sort of play some more attack-minded footy. He was then sort of shoveling it out to the outside backs as well. So he wasn't doing much. And whether that's a case of him saving it for the big games or whether that's a case of that's just his play style now, I was kind of betting on him returning to the previous form because last year was a bit quiet, but the 4 years prior to that were a 60 average. So I was betting on that return. It didn't look great in round 1. He has a bye now, which is not the worst for a loophole. And he has Penrith in round 3. So we're going to know very quickly, does he step up in the big games? If he does nothing against Penrith as well, I'll pretty happily sell. But for mine right now, you've done the analysis. I think you've got to stick with him. And there were basically no tackles to be made in that game. So 711K, unless you have a really good trade to make, I'm probably holding on to Harry Grant.
You hold him. He also played half for about 20 minutes when Jerome Hughes got an early rest. So I wouldn't worry about him. He's a gun. Like, he's not going down. He'll average 55 at the very least. Wouldn't worry about one game that was a demolition. Like they were kind of taking a piss after 20 minutes when they were already up like 40-0. So wouldn't worry about Grant. Barnett, I think he's a very obvious hold. I think, look, PPM was great, still a reasonable score. The Warriors can't win if Barnett and James Fisher-Harris are playing 45, 50 minutes. Like they have to be 60, 70-minute guys. So I think the coach will adjust. I think coming out, they probably didn't want to throw them into 70 minutes and give them a risk of injury after like a long kind of preseason. But I think they're definitely playing big minutes this week, and their minutes are only going to go up. I think it's a simple one. Dual position, proven guy who can score. PPM was high, and minutes will only increase. Both him and Fisher-Harris hold them.
Would you say if you're a Barnett owner and you see 60-plus minutes this week, you're proven right? What if you saw 58 minutes or 55 minutes instead of because he was 51 minutes last week? What if the incline was too slow?
I think you can trade him if he plays between 50 to 55 minutes this week. But I think if it's 58 to 60, you're holding.
Okay.
I just think the upside for his scoring profile, how reliant on him they are for making meters. They don't have the backs and the halves this year to win through there. Like they have to win it through the middle. So Barnett and Fisher-Harris are their key guys.
I agree with you. And I think there was about 15 minutes in that game where Dylan Walker and Aaron Clark played at the same time. If they want to win games, those 15 minutes will go to Fisher-Harris and Barnett. Like that it's that simple, right? They're the two best props they've got. They've got some young guys on the bench, but those guys going off was really detrimental to them against Canberra. Now, sells, these are also some traps as well. And I want to talk about these guys because I think some of them are being overhyped a little bit. So don't feel like you have to sell these guys this week, especially Nafahu White. I want to talk about him right at the end. But Davey Moale is the first one. And you shouted out Jamie for a good call. I'm going to shout him out for, I think he was on Davey Moale for a bad one. Look, I love Jamie. I love that he goes for it. He really goes for it. But he's not the only one too. I think Fantasy Pro, Butters from over there as well. I think he was on. Nostradamus is on. There's a lot of podcasts that were on Davey Moale, and Moale came out, scored 15 points in 30 minutes. Absolute stinker. If you jumped on Moale, I think you can cut your losses and sell this one. I don't think you need to give it a second week because it's only going to get worse for Moale. 403K as well. It's a great price point. You can straight swap to Jamie Humphries. So you're a lucky coach. Treat it that way. Learn the lesson. Move on. And it's an easy sell.
Yeah, I think he's a perfect price to sell to any of the guys on our Cal's list this week and Humphries. So that's an easy one. Look, I think it's not. I think he can still be pretty solid. Like if he gets the minutes. The only thing is there's just so many better options at that price point this year. Except Kelma Tuolongi. He's probably the other option at that price.
Kelma's a sell, by the way. Kelma's
he's an obvious sell.
Yeah,
he's like beyond this
sell. He dropped. Terrible.
Yeah. Cookie, I think it was an easy one. We were hoping for that 80-minute roll with a bit of luck, didn't get it. So I think it's an easy sell in terms of if he's not getting 80 minutes at his price, he's not worth it. Did look good when he was on the field, but better use of money out there. I don't know if you have anything to add.
It was the perfect game for him to get 80 minutes, and he didn't play lock. Like that's my main thing there. There was a bunch of other guys got inflated minutes. He got 58.
Yeah.
So be trash. Yeah. Silly Tupanua, a bit of a trap, I think. So came out, looked fantastic in that game. Scored 2 tries, hit some awesome base stats as well. So you could make a case that he's a guy who's going to play a big role through the middle. He just has never done that ever in his career. And I would be shocked if Tupanua plays a big role through the middle forward rotation at the Dogs this year. Like, I just cannot see that happening. So I'm looking at him and thinking, you know what? They're going to get Sam Hughes back. They're going to get a few other guys back as well. I doubt Tupanua plays a big role through the middle. I don't think he's going to be consistent enough. And at 439K, you're kind of betting on him to get the 600K. It's a pretty expensive price for a guy like him. So I think he's a pretty easy trap.
Yeah, not much more to add. Curran back this week as well. I think he would have to. He's not going to score 2 tries every week. He is a good hole runner, so he can score tries. But playing in the middle, that's a bit more difficult. I think he's never been a base stat guy. So if he was 339K, yeah, probably. But 439, no, thank you.
And then Kobe Hetherington. What are your thoughts on Hetherington? Because he played about 45 minutes, scored. It was 43 minutes, 33 points actually. So
yeah,
decent.
We've seen it before. We've seen Ed Lockie average about 45, 50 minutes for that kind of average. I think it's a really simple case that we've seen it before. It hasn't been great. Same role as previous. Didn't get the huge minute role some people were expecting under Madge. So I think he's an easy trade out at his price. If you've got him, perfect Humphrey target or other kind of, Tamale or all those guys.
I will say, if we didn't have such good options this year, I would say he's probably a hold because that game was not made for defense, and he's probably a defensive guy. So yeah. But this year, you just got too many options. You got to sell him. And then Nafahu White, and I'm keen to get your thoughts on this here too, Biz. But from my perspective, last week was perfectly made for big minutes in the middle and big points in the middle. Now, Nafahu White played 48 minutes and scored 43 points in a game where, we saw Nat Butcher pull out late. We saw no Spencer Lenu. We saw Victor Radley, Copper HIA, about 6 minutes in, which moved Suo Wong to the edge as well. So the middle rotation was absolutely ravaged for the Roosters. He didn't clear 50 minutes. He's not going to clear sort of that low 40s average without 50 minutes. So that's only going to get worse as well. Like, if you've got Nafahu White, stick with him for now. But more what I'm getting at here is I'm seeing a few people talking about trading him in because of the Roosters situation. Not a move to make. Not a move to make. He'll have a couple of good weeks here. I'm sure he'll be solid this week. So if you've got him in your team, start him this week, but be planning how you're going to sell him in about 3 or 4 weeks' time because the cash is going to dry up for Nafahu White.
Yeah, definitely hold him this week. He'll get another good score. If he plays 48 minutes, 40-plus score again. But with all those guys coming back, like we mentioned, Nat Butcher, Egan Butcher, Lenu, XYZ, his minutes will drop. And he will kind of, by that time, like if you don't already have him, he'll kind of be 440, 450K after this week. And then he'll kind of peak out for what his role will be. I think they'll use him pretty much as an impact kind of forward. Play him this week and have plans to get rid of him in the next couple of weeks.
Easy move there. So I think to summarize here, channel your inner Piakura. Farewell to Tommy Talau, legend of the show. Look, we hope he features in future. But yeah, for this week's trades, it's targeting Humphreys, it's targeting Tamale, and then go back to the buys section if you want to look at some of these guys around that 600K mark as well. Really shoring up your team's cash generation, though. That's the big thing. The other thing I want to talk about here as well is Nathan Cleary is my captain this week up against the Roosters. It's a great matchup. You could make a case for Terrell May, but they're probably the two that I would consider this round. Anything else you'd add there, Biz?
Nope. Cleary captain versus the Roosters for sure. Terrell May might captain him when Cleary has tougher matchups.
Bang on. Cleary, score prediction, what do you reckon?
90 plus.
I'm going to go 107. So we're in the same boat there. Big score for Cleary coming. Thanks for jumping on, guys. Our first buy, hold, sell of the year every week, Wednesday, 7 a.m. with debuts. So cheers for jumping on, Biz.
Cheers, mate.